this meeting to order at 6 o'clock. We need roll call, please.
Sure. Director Burnworth?
Here.
Director Goodsow?
Here.
Director Medard? Director Proctor?
Here.
Director Berker?
Here.
Director Valdez? Director Garcia?
Here.
Would everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready, begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we'll move on to public comments. Public comments. At this time, the board will hear comments on any agenda item. If any person wishes to be heard, they should stand, address themselves, identify and state the subject for the comment. Time limit will be three minutes. A total of 15 minutes will be allocated for each item. The board may find it necessary to limit the total amount for all public comments on items not appearing on the agenda to 1 hour. It's a special one. So, do we have any public comments? Perfect. With that, we're going to break into closed session.
For the benefit of the public, closed session will probably take 20 minutes or less.
Yeah. You guys have to sit outside for the Now we'll move on to item 6, items for discussion, evaluation, and possible approval. Item A, discussion and action to approve term sheet dated November 5th, 2024 for delivery to the City of El Centro and El Centro Regional Medical Center, finalizing Ivhd-Special terms for acquisition of hospital as required by Ivhd-Special.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, single item for discussion and action tonight is this board's statutory obligation to finalize Ivhd-Special's terms for acquisition of ECRMC as required by Health and Safety Code 32499.6C4A. We have an offer after many months of diligence and some very zealous representation from our ad hoc committee, our negotiation ad hoc committee, dozens of meetings and Zooms that we've had internally and with the City of El Centro, with ECRMC, to talk about terms, liabilities, financial positions. We have hired actuaries, we have hired surveyors, to make sure that the assets that are contemplated to be transferred are in the condition that just so everyone's on the same page about the condition of the hospital and all of its current assets and liabilities. So we've had very productive, I think, conversations that have been very helpful with staff from ECRMC. And it's culminated in this offer, this asset transfer offer. We do have a draft of an asset transfer agreement that in draft form we have discussed with ECRMC and El Centro, but because we need to finalize the terms, we wanted to get that done at this board meeting first. And then as contemplated by AB 918, the city will have an opportunity to accept our offer or not. But the city is obligated to negotiate and continue negotiating in good faith the terms of our proposed offer. So at this point, I'm going to start introducing the offer, and then I'm going to have my colleague and partner, Josh, who is on Zoom, walk through the term sheet for the benefit of the board and the benefit of the members of the public, so that the terms are clear and we have an opportunity for the board to ask questions if you have any. And I have some kind of summary notes, my Cliff Notes versions about the economic terms relating to the offer. And then if the board is so inclined, you will be asked to approve and authorize the board chair to sign this and deliver it to the City of El Centro and ECRMC through a motion and a vote. So the cover letter notes that on behalf of the Imperial Valley Healthcare District, we're submitting the term sheet which summarizes IVHD's offer to acquire from El Centro Regional Medical Center and the City of El Centro all of the assets and liabilities of the El Centro Regional Medical Center, a municipal hospital of the city that provides healthcare services to the Imperial Valley through its 161-bed acute care medical center and multiple outpatient centers. The potential acquisition of the assets and liabilities is referred to in the term sheet as the transaction. This offer finalizes IVHD's terms for the transaction as required by AB 918. The specific terms of the offer, which again Josh will talk through, are reflected in the term sheet. I will note that the offer includes all liabilities and assets, including the retirement obligations of the City of El Centro, the pension liability. But I'll note that the IVHD board has discussed, the ad hoc negotiation committee has discussed a willingness to consider an alternative proposal that could potentially leave the pension liability with the City of El Centro. But because AB 918 obligates us on the face of the statute to extend an offer that assumes all of the assets and liabilities, including retirement plans, this is an alternative scenario that we can explore with the city through good faith negotiations after tonight. So that's the sort of alternative scenario. Is scenario A, the city accepts this offer on its face. Great, we have a deal, we'll move forward towards closing. If the city rejects the offer and continues to negotiate in good faith, then we are also willing to consider an alternative proposal that leaves the pension liability with the City of El Centro. And, you know, continue to negotiate because it's very important to this board to acquire ECRMC and to start fulfilling the goal of AB 918. So at this time, I will turn the mic over to Josh so he can walk through the non-binding and the binding provisions of the term sheet.
Thanks, Adriana. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So Adriana covered high level the transaction, but effectively the offer is for IVHD to acquire 100% of the assets and 100% of the liabilities of the El Centro healthcare establishment at the closing of the proposed transaction. We do anticipate that there will be approximately a 3 to 6 month gap between the signing of a binding definitive agreement for the acquisition and the closing, and that's because of the need to procure license transfers and permits and some regulatory approval. So there will be a gap between the signing of a definitive agreement and a closing. And that gap leads to some of the rationale for the principal economic terms of the transaction. So I'm going to walk through those now. So at the closing of the transaction, which again could be up to about 6 months from now, IVHD is going to purchase all the assets and assume all the liabilities of the healthcare establishment for $1. At the closing, the expectation and requirement that will be set forth in the purchase agreement is that the assets would need to include at least $10 million of cash on hand, and that the liabilities that are transferred, and we define this term specified liabilities, or specified payables, which is effectively the accounts payable, that at the closing, the accounts payable that are transferred over to IVHD cannot exceed $23 million. To the extent that we get to the closing and the cash on hand is less than $10 million, the offer provides that the city will come to the table and deliver an amount of cash to make up that differential. So if at closing the hospital assets include $8 million of cash, that's $2 million short of the $10 million shortfall, the city would be required to come to the closing with an additional $2 million of cash to fund working capital needs of the hospital. And to the extent that at closing the hospital has more than $23 million of specified payables, which again is primarily accounts payable, for every dollar of specified payables in excess of $23 million, the offer requires that the city at the closing deliver an amount of cash to make up that difference. There would be a period of time, we hope it to be fairly quick, but within about 120 days after the closing, whereby the parties go back and kind of vet the actual amount of cash and the actual amount of specified payables that were transferred over at closing, and there would be a true-up at that time. Things like checks that are issued but haven't been cashed could cause the actual cash that was on hand at closing to be slightly off from what was estimated at closing. And so the idea would be that if within that 120-day window, it's discovered that either there was a shortfall in cash or there were more specified payables than were estimated at closing, the city would be obligated to pay to Ivhd the differential. Ivhd has been provided through its diligence a number of forecasts. The most recent one that we received was a forecast provided to Ivhd on October 28th that was dated September 28th, 2024 for the hospital. That forecast included a number of expected supplemental payments or revenue that is anticipated to be received by the hospital. And to the extent that, those payables are projected to come in as a date certain, at least that's how it's set forth in the forecast. And to the extent that prior to the date that we close, one of these supplemental payments that was expected to come in after the date that we close comes in prematurely, then the target amount of cash, so that $10 million figure, is going to be increased by the amount of those premature, early specified payments. The idea being that to the extent that a revenue source that Ivhd was anticipating to come in once the hospital was under Ivhd's control did not come in while it was under Ivhd's control, at least Ivhd gets the benefit of that cash. So let's see, moving on to some additional economic terms. So the expectation is that at some point down the road, Ivhd is going to seek a voter-approved funding mechanism for the hospital. We don't know exactly how long that will take, but we do know based on the forecasts we've received that Ivhd is going to have a cash need in the interim until there is a voter-approved funding mechanism. So from the time that we close until the first funds are received under a voter-approved funding mechanism, every 6 months, beginning on July 1st, 2025, the city will make a $2 million cash payment to Ivhd. So the first such payment would be on July 1st, 2025, the second payment January 1st, 2026, and so on every 6 months until the first revenues are received from a voter-approved funding mechanism. There is obviously with the forecast we received, there's some uncertainty regarding the cash situation of the hospital at any given point in time. We had some concerns about the possibility that the hospital would fall below a kind of a critical level of cash at some point before a voter-approved funding mechanism is in effect. And so we have a 2-year window of time where effectively the city will make available to the hospital / Ivhd, I'll call it a line of credit, but up to $15 million, whereby if cash on hand for Ivhd falls below, for the hospital falls below $5 million at any point in that 2-year window, Ivhd can notify the city that cash on hand has fallen below that $5 million threshold, and the city is obligated to make a cash payment. And this can happen more than once, but not in the aggregate in excess of $50 million, to bring the hospital up to that $5 million threshold cash on hand. So those are the principal economic terms. I'm going to cover some of the additional details of the offer at this point. So again, these economic terms are non-binding. There was a concern that, like with any operating business, Ivhd would be taking on an operating company, the hospital, that could have contingent liabilities that no one really knows the scale or scope of what they may be. There are insurers out there. We've done some diligence on this, and we believe that a representation and warranty insurance policy can be procured. There's no guarantee that it can be procured, but we've had some preliminary conversations with insurers whereby the expectation would be that the definitive agreement for this transaction would include a number of robust representations and warranties regarding the historical operations of the hospital, And to the extent that any of those are not true, and they result in financial liabilities that IVHD is expected to absorb, but there would be an insurance policy, a representation and warranty insurance policy that would be available for IVHD to obtain recourse under. We anticipate that the policy premium for such a policy is approximately $500,000. That's subject to change, and our offer includes a requirement that the city fund the policy premium, and that the city fund what's called the retention, but most people think of that as a deductible under the policy, which is likely to be about 0.5% to 1% of the policy limit. So that covers our the non-binding provisions of the offer. I'm going to go now into the binding provisions. So the first one being that IVHD and its counsel, namely Adriana and myself, will prepare the initial draft of the definitive agreement. As Adriana mentioned, we already have a fairly substantially complete draft of that definitive agreement that's been shared with the city and the hospital. We expect it to reflect the terms of this offer, or however this offer may change to the extent that it is subsequently negotiated. We've got a requirement that the hospital and the city provide IVHD full access to the financial records and the facilities of the hospital for diligence purposes as it continues to gear up for finalizing a definitive agreement, honing in on the scope of the representations and warranties in the purchase agreement, and generally assuming operations of the hospital should the transaction close. There's a requirement that the hospital be operated in the ordinary course of business between the time that the term sheet is signed and the time that a definitive agreement is entered into, and then we would expect that the definitive agreement itself would contain a corresponding provision that requires the hospital to be operating in the ordinary course of business between the time that the definitive agreement is signed and the time that the transaction closes. The offer provides that each party is going to be responsible for all of its own fees and costs incurred in connection with negotiating and pursuing the transaction, but in the event that the transaction does close, the city will be responsible for paying up to $1.5 million of IVHD's expenses associated with the transaction. And then the last couple of provisions, the transaction is expected to be governed by the laws of the state of California, the binding provisions in the agreement would terminate, or in this term sheet, would terminate on the 90th day following the signing of the term sheet, or in the event a definitive agreement is signed, these binding provisions would terminate, or if the parties otherwise cease negotiations. So that covers the terms of the offer. I am happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Does any board have any questions? Do you have any questions from the public?
I have a question regarding.
Can you state your name, please?
Oh, sorry, John Graff from Raleigh. Just a question regarding the hospital's bond debt. How will this be covered in the terms of acquisition?
The bond liability is expected to fully transfer from ECRMC over to IVHD.
Target specific payables he referenced as just accounts payable. So it's much larger than that,
Yeah.
so shouldn't that be defined?
Josh, do you want to handle how the bond debt would be? The bond debt is currently, as I understand, paid for by the revenues of the hospital, and they expect to continue to be paid for by the revenues
So the
of the
bond is
hospital.
considered an accounts payable.
No, the bond debt is not AP.
So I would ask that the targeted specific payables be more specifically defined. Because you're saying that it's not covered in the accounts payable. He said specific payables is only accounts receivable. So where does bond debt fall when we're considered? What's a payable?
I can take.
So I can't hear the question. If there's a question directed to me, so you meant.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I'll hand the mic over. We're not really, public comment is not necessarily a Q&A for the board. I recommend against it. But Dave, if you want to shed insight, I think I have an answer too.
Yeah, just two different points. The bond debt is considered a long-term liability, and so it's not considered an AP. It is a cash payment out of the operations, however, but it's not considered part of AP.
Yeah.
And AR is accounts receivable, so AR is what we're receiving or expected to collect. Accounts payable is what we're expected to pay.
The bond debt is proposed to be transferred over as IVHD is required by AB 918 to acquire all of the assets and liabilities of ECRMC. We're required by law to extend an offer for all the assets and liabilities, so the bond debt's included in that.
Do you have any other public comments? Seeing none?
Oh, just I'll make it a comment. In the course of this, it appears that the feasibility studies have not been completed, but that's part of the acquisition discussions, and I'm wondering why those haven't been completed. I know that Pioneers have withheld information for quite a while, but I know you've had it in your possession since the beginning of October. So,
Had what in possession since October?
well, the information that you've asked Pioneers to turn over to complete the Coffin Hall study, that was turned over to you approximately beginning of October. So I'm asking, what is the status of the feasibility studies and how will they be calculated included in the acquisition discussions?
What I'll say is, I don't necessarily think your statements are accurate, but the information that Pioneers did send over in response to a Public Records Act request was forwarded to Kaufman Hall for the purposes of evaluating a feasibility study, which I think will occur more easily once both the hospital and both hospitals are under IVHD's possession and control. But we are focused today's agenda item is on the ECRMC offer. And, I mean, obviously the board and the negotiation committee and our financial strategists who have advised us throughout these negotiations have kept in mind the combined efficiencies that will be achieved once Pioneers is also under IVHD's possession and control, but they're not right now. So, I don't know, I don't understand I guess I don't understand your question, but I'm not
The
really.
feasibility studies were not conditioned upon the acquisition of the hospitals. My understanding was, according to 918, the feasibility studies was to be done to help the acquisition discussions.
Yeah,
Okay, so
but the
here
Kaufman,
we are in acquisition and it hasn't been done.
well, it has been done, right? There was a Kaufman Hall report produced. There was the opinion of this board that the Kaufman Hall study was incomplete and outdated, but it was produced. We do have one. We have a BAE study, we have a Kaufman Hall study, and more importantly, we have months worth of NDA protected working discussions with ECRMC, the city of El Centro, and financial records, a financial strategist's evaluation, which brought us to, I mean, I'm not a financial strategist, but we have very qualified folks guiding us through these discussions to help us come to these terms, which Josh just walked through. So I think we're pretty well advised.
Yeah. So
Just
with that,
final comment, neither one of those studies made a recommendation on feasibility. One of them recommended on proposed taxes for all funding source, the other one did not. But neither study made a determination as to whether it was a feasible thing to do.
The combination of hospitals?
thank you for your comments,
Yeah.
Mr. Grass. I'm gonna bring it back to the board
Yeah.
now. Do you have any questions, comments from the board? Yeah, I would say our negotiation team spent a lot of time, working on this, to get to this point. It's our first offer to fulfill our AB 918, obligations. I mean, I expect the good faith negotiations with, the city of El Centro and ECRMC to continue. And I personally look forward to this transaction happening.
Same, I think our ad hoc committee put a lot of work into this as well as our advisors have put a lot of tremendous work into this as well. I think we're on the right track. I think we're gonna make the healthcare for our entire community better, and this is a step in the right direction.
I agree. We do have some excellent financial advisors. And I can guarantee you that I am a dot your I's, cross your T's, fiscally responsible person.
Hello everyone, this is Debbie Morgano, and we are here at the IMPERIAL.
Okay, I'm I'm not sure what that was, but anyways, I do want to assure you that we have been working very hard and we will continue to work very hard to make sure that this is successful. And I have a vested interest in making sure that healthcare in this Imperial Valley is quality. I think everyone in this room agrees that combining the hospitals together is the best way to achieve that, and we're not doing this lightly. I mean, we have spent a lot of time and a lot of energy, and I want to thank BRG and the guys there online that are listening in today, because they have worked very hard also. But we have confidentiality things so that at this point we cannot share everything with you. And I hope you understand that, because obviously we're trying to do a deal. So, but I do appreciate all of you being here as well, but we're working hard for you and the people of this Imperial Valley. And we're representative of all of the Imperial Valley. So,
Yeah, I look forward to seeing BRG as they continue to work with us throughout this process, you know, throughout to continuing negotiations, to when we acquire PMH, to looking and financial strategize as we're building one district. I think behind the scenes, we have a whole lot of people and a whole lot of effort going into this, and I'll be the first to say, I think quality in our Imperial Valley can only go up from here. You know, I personally am not happy of the quality at either hospital. You know, if my kid breaks their arm, I'm taking them to San Diego, and I think that's a problem. And until that gets solved, I think we need to continue to try to make healthcare better. So, if I have any other comments from the board?
I just wanted to say that I think this is a very fair offer, and that I mean, I know all of us are putting a lot of work into it. I know we have a commitment to our community to do what's right. And like a couple of members said, it's not about us individually, it's about the entire district, the entire county. So I just hope, although I'm not part of the negotiation team, that the City of El Centro is going to pony up to make sure that this is fair for everyone in the county. Because at the end of the day, this is an offer, and we're entering into it in good faith, and in good faith for everyone in the community, not just us individually.
and I do want to clarify one point, because sometimes I feel like my words get misunderstood. But my vested interest has nothing to do with financials. It has to do with the fact that I have a 92-year-old mother who was not able to travel to San Diego to get health care. She recently passed away here in the valley, and it's not because there was any low quality of care, but my interest is because the people in this valley deserve to have good quality health care here, so that if you cannot make that trip, which is 4 hours round trip, you have the best of the best. And I applaud Pablo and his crew at El Centro Regional, because they have done a phenomenal job over there, and Dave in stepping it up. And I'm really looking forward to bringing Raleigh on board so that we can step it up together and have the best of the best here, so we're not having to make that trip. I mean, we can do it. If we all join together, we can make this awesome, and that's why I'm here. Just wanted to clarify. Nothing to do financially. I have nothing to do with the medical field. So just wanted to clarify, my vested interest is not monetary. Thank you.
No worries.
Sorry.
No, I appreciate it. With that, I don't think anybody can fault that, Laura. So, I'll entertain a motion.
I so move that we accept or approve the asset transfer offer as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Goodsell and a second by Garcia. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries unanimously. With that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 6:48 p.m.